The name is Davey D. Originally from the Bronx, living in Oakland, California. Been down with hip hop since '77. The owner of Davey D's Hip Hop Corner. I look at hip hop as expression, not as like some sort of industry thing to jump into. And I say that to say that I think when you're growing up, there's all sorts of things that people jump into. Basketball, sports of various types. Some people like to dance. And for me, when I was coming up, people started, were restarting to rhyme again, because rhyming's always been around. There was an explosion with the dancing, and DJ culture was just really starting to emerge. And my attraction initially was to the rhyming, so I started out as an MC. And, I was a member of a crew, and did parties and the whole nine, and nothing to really say had an impact on the culture, because there were people that were much more well-known, but I was part of that generation, third or fourth generation of people that was attracted to a bunch of activities that were allowing us to express ourselves. And that was my initial entry. Moving on, I just decided that I wanted to do something as a profession that reflected my passion. And so I started to write about music, talk about it, bring politics to it. And by the 90s, when the internet was starting to roll up, I opened up my Davey D's Hip Hop Corner in '92. Some of the unique things that I'm known for is being on both coasts. I've been able to bring a kind of unique history, because I was obviously a practitioner there and a practitioner here. So I kind of have a unique perspective on seeing the rise of this culture in both places. As a writer, I started recording things very early. And so a lot of my early writings were quoted in reference. I was doing columns as far back as '86, had newsletters back in '86, '87. So I think I was filling a void that existed at that time. I mean, there was no computers and MacBooks and all that. So, it was hard copies and passing them out in a very influential area, which is the Bay Area. At the same time, my name was known because I was DJing. So I was a DJ, and I was a popular DJ that was doing this alongside of everything else. So a lot of big parties I was spinning at. And I also started doing radio in '86. So my presence or influence was that early on I was a voice, and a voice that, a loud voice at that, that was able to, I guess, bring attention to the culture. Did it influence some people? I think, depends who you ask. Some people it did. Some people it was a reaffirmation. Other people didn't have any impact, Did I think I made a difference? I think so. I opened up a lot of doors, for quite a few people. But I think I don't make too big of a deal out of it, because I think that's something that a lot of us do when we're in position. I think it only starts to become unusual in a climate where people are very selfish, and they've adapted a motive of do for self, where it's all about them and them at all costs. And I'm coming from a date and time where it wasn't all about that. It was about the more of us that sit at the table, the better it is for all of us. We all get to eat. And it wasn't so much trying to get affirmation from somebody, because we already were affirming each other. It wasn't like, can I get on this radio station, or can I get into somebody else's situation? We were the situation. So to me, it's a very natural thing in terms of just trying to reflect what this culture has meant for me, in my day-to-day activities. There are a lot of favorite memories. The one that always stands out is seeing Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Four back, I want to say '78 or '79, at Bronx High School of Science performing. That was an incredible party. It was probably the first time I really got a chance to see the full extent of this emerging culture. I don't even know if we called it hip hop at that time, to be honest. You know, we just knew Flash and Furious 4 was performing at Bronx Science where I went to school, and so seeing them perform and seeing a type of showmanship that I think rivaled any quote-unquote musical act at that time was incredible. Hearing Melly Mel and Kid Creole, and at that time it was Mr. Ness, who now is known as Scorpio, and Cowboy, you know, just doing these routines was incredible. My earlier memories about that is just remembering that one part of the room was standing behind the ropes watching the MCs like me, listening to every word, and the other part was watching Flash, you know, and his ability to cut. So I remember that. Other early memories, being in a record store and running into Bambaataa. And Bam at that time was feared, and he was highly respected, and he was known as the master of records. And the thing about Bam, which stood out, was that he had every break beat that was out there. But I had a beat that he didn't know about, and I remember being in the store and playing it, and him coming over. You know, I didn't know him at the time, and you know, here he is, like, what's that record? You know, and years later, you know, I told him what the record was, but didn't tell him was the B-side of the record, because not all those records had the B-side, which was The Beautiful Girl in the World by Nielsen. On the other side was a song called Rainmaker. So I bought all the copies at that time. You know, I think there was like 5 left, and I bought all of them, and I left the store. And then years later, it was like, man, I took that record. But of course, he eventually found it because there were tapes out where he was playing it. But I mean, you know, there's a million and one fun memories. You know, being at the Promenade near Kennedy High, you know, doing a gig there. That was probably one of my first public ones with my crew. Being in Co-op City with another crew that I was down with, and you know, the things that we did there. There's many of them. And I say that to say that no one thing just stands out. There's no one game-changing type of scenario. I think the whole period was very magical. It was very innocent, and it was full of hope, because you didn't know where the next day would lead you. You know, I mean, there was no such thing as doing records, no such thing as being on TV. There was none of that. You know, this was just, you know, neighborhood kids trying to make a name for themselves amongst their neighborhood. And when I look back on it 20, 30 years, you know, it's very magical. I'm glad I experienced it. The biggest challenge is not having the financial support that I see afforded to other people, and having to constantly be resourceful. When I started doing my newsletter, for example, I didn't have a computer. So I had to borrow, and I had to be very efficient with my time on how I was going to do what I was going to do. So you literally had to lay things out, then borrow. At that time, it was like a cheap Mac, and then, you know, lay out your stuff and then go print it. I didn't have money to mail the things off, so I would mail them using the station's postage, you know, things like that. Being on radio, when I started working at KML, there was no welcome mat. It was really a thing of trying to strategically figure out how you can make people notice you in a way that would be meaningful. So I used to send those newsletters to the program director, Keith Knafley at the time, and Alex Mejia, who was one of the first people who actually brought me into the station, and others. But I would do it very smart. I would send colored copies of my newsletter, and those colored copies would stand out. It would be in black envelopes. They'd get it, they'd be like, what the heck is this? They open it up, and then it would be the newsletter. And that brought attention to what I was doing. Getting records was a challenge, because you had to buy them. And at that time, they had record pools, and Billboard was sending out people who they thought were influential free records. So how did I get on a list to start getting those? So there are a lot of challenges. I think as you mature, the challenges switch. Once upon a time, the challenge might have been, how do you get known? How do you become a part of something that people are attracted to? How do you get on commercial radio? How do you get the biggest gig? And now it's not really about that. It's more like, how do you really start to reflect this culture in a way that maintains a certain level of integrity and a certain level of control, where you don't have to compromise. And, and not compromising was a challenge. I'm glad I was able to do the work that I do without too much compromise, where I can look back and be like, I'm proud of the things I did. I didn't really sell my soul to get to where I'm at. Could I have gone farther if I did? Sure. But I think I would have required a little bit of selling of the soul, and I'm not about that. I was somebody who tried to make a difference. My integrity is intact. I was influenced by a lot, and I influenced others. You actually asked me about one of my fondest memories. The fondest memories is, spending a lot of time with Chuck D. Chuck is like an older brother, being able to, when they were at the height of their prime, he would come to town and we'd go to places like this and sit there for hours and just, shoot the shit, exchange information and insights and all that. And that was very uplifting, because Chuck opened doors, and eventually we wound up working together. That's a big deal. But I also think I did that for a lot of other people. There are many people that came up because when doors were open, I helped pull them in. And, there's a lot to name, so I won't name everybody. And I think people can acknowledge it for themselves down the road. I did good work and do good work that I think will stand the test of time. My writings will stand the test of time. My broadcasts will stand the test of time. And I think those are good things. Well, I teach, music class, hip-hop class, Black Images class at SF State. I do a TV show, Free Speech TV, that airs on Sunday nights. I do a daily radio show that's syndicated, Hard Knock Radio, so that's good. I think there will be improvements on all those projects that I do. Probably will redo the book that we did, and finally put that out. I think just being, maintaining my humanity. We're all commodities, all pawns that are being used, People look at you and they go, are you white? We can use you this way. Are you black? We use you that way. Are you young? We flip it this way. Older? So we're constantly being assaulted with corporate, dominance that wants to move us in categories and mold us up and package us for their own personal gain. And sometimes you can get caught up in that and not realize it's happening. So maintaining my humanity, my understanding and sensitivity to those who have less than what I have, I think is important. Seeking justice for a lot of the wrongdoings that go on are things that I'm passionate about. That gives my life meaning. Hip-hop at the end of the day is about building community. If it's anything else, it isn't what you say it is. It's also a direct reflection of the people and communities that embrace it. So to the degree that we're shallow and we seem commercial and we don't seem to be deep in our thought and our execution of things, is a reflection of what's going on in the world around us and how much we've allowed that to be a part of who we are. Hip-hop at its high point brings people together and reminds us of basic truths that we should be all rallying around and uplifting. Those basic truths may be support of one another, being honest with one another, connecting our history, being resourceful, and making this world a better place than where we found it. Those are things that is real easy to get away from. And I think sometimes when we act upon the trinkets that are put in front of us versus really remembering that the reason why this culture existed, it was a response to oppression. It was a response to people taking away from us and denying us our humanity. When we forget that, then I think we moved in another direction that I wouldn't necessarily classify as hip hop per se. You know, it's commodity, and we're just trying to be, we're trying to replace those who are in charge, so that we can be the next person in charge. My feeling is like, why be in charge? You know, why not live life and live it fully and let others live theirs fully? So that's my thoughts.